And firstly, I would like to talk about Glen Alleman little, and then I will give the floor to Glen.
Okay, let's.
Yeah, I am so sorry. I am sharing the screen.
Let's see. Let me share my screen. First of all, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, but yeah, dear Glen, before that, I would like to just mention about you a little, and then
Certainly.
no problem, no problem. It's no problem. I am trying to do it. Yes, and then we have, yeah, and then, yeah. Yeah, as a briefly, yeah, Glen has over 40 years of experience managing complex system in aerospace, defense, and industrial controls, and enterprise IT domain with traditional and agile project management methods. And again, welcome to our events, Glen. And now I am giving the floor to you, and you can share this screen now.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Let's see, let me share. Whoop, stop. Here we go. And share this.
Yes, great.
Okay, so can everyone see that screen? Good. Okay, well, thank you so much for inviting me. It was quite a pleasure. Olivia and I have chatted on LinkedIn for a while, kind of lost when. I don't know, Olivier, it's been a year or something like that. So, he invited me to make a speaking contribution here. And the title of obviously the session is about the people, and a couple of things. First of all, my 40 years experience came quickly. I was at one point a want-to-be physics professor and researcher. It turns out it's much harder to do than I thought, and I had to go get a real job. And I took I was a software engineer on a particle accelerator, and that same skill set and the same math and the same theory works for digital radar systems. It's a signal processing thing. And I went to a defense company in Southern California, and we complained about how poorly the place was run when we were very young. And they sent us all back to get graduate degrees in systems engineering, and put us in charge of the jobs that we were complaining weren't done well. So I'm essentially a systems engineer by training, and have always worked as a program manager or a project manager in that realm, which is software intensive systems. So this is kind of a culmination of a long career of managing complex systems of systems, and been very involved in PMI, our local things, and spoken at many conferences. But what PMI does not provide as a concept that the defense and space people do, and is actually mandated in our acquisition world, is to start with capabilities-based planning. And the question that is asked and must be answered in the proposal and during all execution is, what capabilities do we need to possess to accomplish our mission or fulfill a strategy? Only then do you start with requirements, and do you start with schedules and costs and risks and budgets and all the execution. Because if you do not know what those capabilities are, you literally do not know what done looks like. And let me just skip to our next slide here, right on the right page here. So the question is, and that phrase, what does done look like, has two units of measure in our world: the effectiveness of the solution and the performance of the solution. So the problem that we have to solve is to define what are the units of measure of effectiveness and what are the units of measure of performance. And those are systems engineering questions. So at the end of the day, project management and program management is systems engineering. And that's what we're going to present today. And this short briefing, in an hour plus questions, is the basis of how we get things done in our domain. And my quick story is a spacecraft that landed in the Pacific Ocean in December was late, seriously late, and seriously over budget for a lot of reasons. But the original statement at a meeting at NASA in Houston was from the program manager was, I need a spacecraft that will take 4 astronauts to the station, dock safely, stay there for 6 months, come home, and live to tell about it. How much does that cost? Was the capabilities. That's what he needed. Fly 4 astronauts to the space station, dock safely, stay there for that time, come home, and talk about it later. So that spacecraft's name was Orion. It was originally called this Crew Exploration Vehicle. And it was late and over budget, but it did work. We'll get there. So if we apply that notion of capabilities-based planning to crises that always feel like a dead-end road, right? They happen without us knowing it. So an earthquake happens and a building falls down and there's lots of injuries and lots of destruction. The challenge is, what capabilities do we need to have, do we need to possess as an emergency response organization to deal with this mission of saving people and putting things back? And the idea that project management is part of that is true, but project management training and project management books and the PMI itself always starts with requirements, technical requirements, operational requirements, people requirements, staffing requirements, all those things. And the question that's never answered, if I possessed all of those on day 0, what would I do with them? How would I accomplish the mission? How would I fulfill the strategy? And that's what is now in our defense acquisition and on our NASA acquisition flowed down through regulations is called capabilities-based planning. And it is now mandated in our domain of space and defense, aerospace and defense, but it's not mandated in other domains. And what I hope to proselytize here is for our PMI view of the world is that we requirements are secondary and maybe even tertiary. We have to start with capabilities. So let's look at this. So what capabilities do we need to possess to deal with disasters, right? Well, first of all, we should be able to prevent them when possible. And we know the technical details of the buildings falling down is that the prevention is those buildings were not built to be earthquake proof or survive earthquakes. And having moved from Southern California here to Colorado, back going on almost 30 years, we actually had earthquake-proof construction. So we lived through many earthquakes. No big things fell down. There were a few things that fell down. Freeway bridges fell down. Well, they were built, 30 years before the earthquakes. So we also then have to have protection of the citizens, and we have to have mitigations for the loss of life to reduce and the property damage. And we have to have formal responses ready to go when there is a disaster. And most importantly, we have to have recovery processes. So those are the capabilities that we need to do. And this is all, by the way, each of these charts these are not my charts, they're charts from official pieces. So there's links down there at the bottom. So our emergency management response thing talks about that. And for each of those 5 mission areas, there's 32 core capabilities. We don't need to read these now, but these are the capabilities that we need to possess. And what I'm going to try to convince you today is if you start with capabilities-based planning and then put into the 32 details of that, you will then have a framework for doing the technical requirements, for doing the operational requirements, and for actually executing the project if you start with capabilities-based planning. So what do I need to do to get the job done? My other little thing here in Boulder. We're the second largest federal footprint in the United States outside of Washington, D.C. So we have all the agencies here, and a great little capabilities-based plan for NASA and Mars is the program manager for the Mars landers. I need to go to Mars, land safely, pick up a rock, take a picture of it with my spectrometer and send that back to NASA in Denver. How much does that cost? And when can you get there? So the NASA people always talk about capabilities. The technical requirements will come later, but I start with my capabilities-based planning. So if we put that in emergency response, here are the capabilities that we need to possess in terms of messaging information to people during a crisis. Simple messages, credible sources. We call that the authoritative source of truth. That's actually a legal term. And consistency and the release of messages when possible. And that's the handbook that does that is down at the bottom there, is the Centers for Disease Control and all their emergency responses. So not only do we have to know what capabilities we need to possess to accomplish the mission, we have to be able to communicate those capabilities in clear and concise and simple and consistent and what is called the authoritative source of truth. There's only one place that you go to look for, and you get the same message no matter who you are and who is asking. It's always the same, that there's no confusion in the messaging. So here's our big problem. We need to have this emergency response plan in place that states what capabilities we possess to accomplish the mission and fulfill the strategy in the presence of the emergency. And if you look at the history of that disaster in Turkey, it didn't turn out that way. There were multiple messages. It was very confusing. People didn't know who was in charge or what their job's supposed to be. They did not have this single authoritative source of truth in the emergency management and emergency response plan, that when the earthquake occurred, you turn to page 1, you find what you're supposed to be doing, and you start doing it. So that is the purpose of a capabilities-based plan, and it was missing. They finally figured it out, but it wasn't there on day 0. It wasn't there a few minutes after the dust settled. And the key to the emergency response planning is, of course, people, because it's the people that are going to do the actionable outcomes to rescue, to recover, to put out the fires, to do all this stuff. It's all about the people. It's always about the people, but they have to have guidance to do that. And the other missing piece, which is also missing from the discussion at PMI, and I'm a big PMI fan, but they're missing out on a couple of things, is if I talk about an actionable outcome, what is its measure of effectiveness and what is its measure of performance? How will I know this outcome is doing its job? Because, and with effectiveness, and how will I know it's doing its jobs in terms of performance? In other words, how do people have to respond properly to save lives, to save property, to save infrastructure, to put the place back into its normal operations? It may take decades to do that, but that's also missing from much of the project management facilities and ideas in PMI, because as project managers, that is usually defined already in the terms of a project management plan or a proposal or the award for buying something. But PMI is not in that world today, and I think they're going to kind of start moving towards that world. Certainly, with our work here today and talking about this, they'll hopefully, PMI itself will hopefully learn some things. So here's the concept of a capabilities-based plan, right? It's a mantra I'll use over and over again. We need a capability to accomplish a mission. What capability do we need to fly to Mars, pick up a rock, take a picture of it, and send that information back to NASA? The technical requirements, those will all come later. My little story long ago from a manager, a senior boss at the radar place who was, guys, you're writing the software and you're building hardware. Do we need to invent new physics to make this work? If the answer is yes, we should have charged twice the amount of money that we told the Air Force we had to do. So that's our first question. Do we have to invent new physics to possess this capability? And the components of that capability are, of course, the people and the processes, and then the material that goes with it. So if we don't have to invent new physics, then let's everybody start getting to work here. So here's 10 essential capabilities for making our infrastructure resilient and responding to disasters. These capabilities need to be in place before the disaster strikes. We've got to have an organization. We've got to have an understanding of the current and the future risks. And we got to have money in place. We got to have all of a resilient urban development. That is, the infrastructure can't fall apart, as well as the buildings. We got to safeguard all this stuff. We got to strengthen all our capacities. We got to increase our cultural and societal resilience. And we've got to increase our infrastructure itself. We've got to ensure all of the effectiveness in our responses. And we got to expedite and recover and build back better. And that's all defined in this document, 10 Essentials for Resilient Cities. And most of the world has some plan like this. The people in Turkey did not have this, so they struggled mightily to get themselves back again. And the management of this disaster starts, of course, with planning, all the public information, all the operational coordination, all the recovery, all the health and social services. So these first parts of this presentation that will be available are the setup for taking all the content of this briefing and putting it to work. This is essentially the handbook for how to recover from disasters, starting with preparation for the disaster before it happens. And when the building falls down or the whole city is destroyed, turn to page 1 of this plan and everybody goes to work. The challenge, of course, is that all of this operates inside of this environment that is volatile, and it's uncertainty. It is uncertain, and it's complex, and it's ambiguous. And there are some worldwide speakers about complexity that claim that you cannot manage in the presence of this condition of being volatile and uncertain and complex, but that is not true. You can manage in the presence of complexity. It's a different solution. It's a systems engineering solution. Global change in the weather is one of those. We just went to a meeting this morning at our local university. That's the Conference on World Affairs, and they're talking about climate change. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the other atmospheric and weather facilities are headquartered here in Boulder, Colorado. If you go to the National Center for Atmospheric Research and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, you'll find the headquarters are here. So we've got lots of climate change people in our neighborhood, and they always talk about complexity and volatility and uncertainty and ambiguity, but they have models. The conclusion from the 2 meetings this morning was, we're in big trouble and we need to do something about it quickly. And the solution to that is people. People come to understand that we can make changes and we can fix things. So we're back to that. So here's how you deal with the VUCA problems that we come about. Is we got to have a vision for the solution for the future. We have to have all the understanding about how to deal with the problem. It has to be clearly and concisely and definitively described. And we have to be agile. We've got to be able to change rapidly for the emerging situations. And climate change is not going away, but we can actually do something with it. The Colorado River is drying up, and the western states are going to run out of water, and so is California and Arizona and New Mexico in the northern parts of Mexico. So guess what? We need a plan, and we need a plan quickly, and it has to operate in the presence of this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment. So that's the cities in Turkey and in Syria have to deal with this in this way. So here's our big challenge. In the past, we haven't done a very good job of this. By the way, these charts have a lot of bullets. We're going to get to better pictures from the charts here in a minute, but these can be taken and be the framework for whatever planning you need to do for your capabilities-based planning. So over the years, all the public problems have been overwhelming, and we're always after the fact, and we're always chasing the problems long after they've occurred with solutions that are not being effective. And so the management based primarily on retrospective approaches, and what capabilities-based planning is based on is the future. What capabilities do I need to possess to deal with future problems, not past problems? Past problems we can deal with standard project management stuff. The building fell down. What's the project management plan to restore the building? Well, that's the standard vertical construction. All that planning is usually linear in its development, and it's sometimes called waterfall. Technically, there is no term of that. In our defense and space business, we did iterative and incremental development starting in the 70s, a little bit before I got there. But it was never done waterfall. That's kind of a buzzword for actually bad project management. So iterative and incremental planning is what we need, and we have to have plans. We've got to know about the impacts on the agencies, and we got to have the public's value for solutions, all those kind of bullet points there. So sources of project management, bad project management in response to disasters. The research shows the following high-level things. There's no coordination, and there's poor information flow. We can't validate the processes relative to the information to make decisions quickly and in timely. We're in presence of rapidly changing decision-making environments across the geography and government, and they're usually not defined. They're not prepared to do that. And we've got slow and ineffective strategies. We got outdated information. We got a high degree of fragmentation. And most importantly, we're missing the interoperability between the organizations. And this is true from local, from regional, to sovereign countries, all the way up to international organizations. They all suffer from this problem. And my pitch here is, if we started with what capabilities do we need to possess to accomplish the mission, a lot of these would go away, or they would become less troubled. So here's just another core failure sources for ineffective responses. This is all well documented. So let's get to some higher level pictures here. The core source of ineffective response starts with missing elements that are critical success factors. We don't talk to each other and ask each other and demand of each other to speak in capabilities-based planning. What, again, it's this mantra. What capabilities do we need to possess to accomplish our mission? And we need to identify them. We need to elicit all the technical and operational requirements. We need to establish this baseline of iterative and incremental responses. And of course, we need to go execute it. And then we've got to do risk management. And these two charts, these two elements of these charts are out of a blog back in 2012. And that Herding Cats blog is the one that I used to write. I now move all that stuff over onto LinkedIn. But capabilities-based planning has been around for quite a while, and this is where we start to do it. So how does this notion of capabilities-based planning support our disaster response efforts? Well, we hopefully have our capabilities-based plan in place, And now we need to put it to work by asking, what do we need to do in terms of execution to address our mission and get our first responders out there? And then all of that. And that's all done in this document down below of improving our responses. Energy management is one of them, and this goes back into 2006. But we have to keep asking ourselves over and over again, if we had these capabilities, how would we apply them? How would we know they're being effective? And how do we know that they're performing as needed to do everything from rescuing people from the collapsed building to restoring the infrastructure for the city, which may take, I think in those pictures in the front, probably decades to do. So here is the official definition of capabilities-based planning, right? It's a functional analysis of the operational requirements that identify based on the task required, and once the required capability and inventory is defined, how do we do it cost effectively? At the end of the day, it's planning under uncertainty to provide a capability suitable for a wide range of modern day challenges. So when we talk about risk management, and we'll get to a chart that speaks to this, there is no such thing as managing risks. All risk comes from uncertainty, and uncertainty in our world, in our project management world, comes in two forms. Uncertainties that are reducible, uncertainties that create risks that are reducible, and those are called epistemic uncertainties. And epistemology is the study of knowledge. So I can buy the knowledge to reduce the uncertainty that reduces the risk. And the second form of uncertainty is aleatory. And alea, A-L-E-A, is a single die that the Greeks gambled with. And in America and in Europe, we have two dice that we gamble with. And those are irreducible uncertainties. Unless you're a deity, you cannot make those uncertainties go away. The weather is an aleatory uncertainty. Earthquakes are aleatory uncertainties. I cannot make them go away. I must have margin. I must have cost margin, I must have schedule margin, and I must have technical margin. So the missing technical margin in Turkey was the buildings were not constructed to survive that earthquake. And it wasn't a big earthquake. It wasn't a seismic level, 6 or 7 that took down all of San Francisco in 1904. It was a Richter scale 4, but those buildings were not built to survive any earthquake. So they did not understand the epistemic uncertainties and construct the buildings appropriately to survive for that. So we got to have it defined before the disaster occurs, and that was most likely missing of the capabilities. And the little buzzword that we use all the time is tangible beneficial outcomes. And the phrase we put in front of that is immutable tangible beneficial outcomes. So that was also missing. They didn't have a plan for a plan. They also didn't have the buildings constructed properly. Okay, but they basically were affected by all the things that could go wrong happened at once, including the missing plan to do the response. So if you may not be in Europe, you may not be familiar with this gentleman, Stephen Covey. He has five effective strategies for people. The second one is start with the end in mind. And what capabilities-based planning tells us is we have to have a plan before the event occurs. I have to have a plan to possess the capabilities to rescue the people, to put out the fires, to get all the infrastructure back in place. And I got to have that before it happens. Otherwise, when it does happen and we don't have that plan, it's going to go bad. And if you don't know what done looks like, if you have children and you go on a trip and they ask, when are we going to get there, over and over again, then if you don't have an answer to that, then they're going to keep asking you that questions. You gotta know where you're going. You gotta know how to recognize how to get there, and you gotta know everything along the way to know that I will actually reach my goal at some time in the future with the right outcomes and the right solution. So what does this capabilities-based plan tell us to do, right? We got to have the capabilities to accomplish our mission. We got to assess the level of change required for each capability along the way. We got to be able to prioritize them in our current organization, in this case, a public organization. And we got to have plans and schedules and budgets for making all these changes along the way. So this is how we get the capabilities-based plan. And this capabilities-based plan answers the following questions, right? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what are the measures demonstrating that it's working? What are the scenarios along the way in our plan that we can take out and ask, what do we have to do next? What is the scenario to hedge against the uncertainty, to test the concepts? What are the plans that be descriptive? They cannot be prescriptive. They have to be descriptive. If A happens, I'm going to have this response to that situation, because we cannot control the future. We can have margin for the future. We can buy information about the future responses, but I cannot control the future. I've got to have responses to this future. So this is back to another issue with one of the PMI handbooks about risk management. You cannot manage risk. You can only manage in the presence of uncertainties that create risk. I cannot make those uncertainties go away unless I'm a deity. The third type of uncertainty, besides epistemic and aleatory, is called ontological uncertainty. And that's the famous unknown unknowns. And in America, we had I can forget what he was. I think he was in the White House. He wasn't a secretary, but Donald Rumsfeld's great quote in Iraq, "Oh, there were unknown unknowns," and that's how we got into all this trouble. Well, he did not read a book titled The Histories, written by Herodotus in 620 BC, when he told Alexander the Great, "Do not go there." And the only time Alexander the Great was defeated in this geographic location, which is the Middle East, was when he went there, and that was the only battle he ever lost in his entire career. And our Donald Rumsfeld didn't read that book, and had he read that book, he would have known that nobody other than Genghis Khan ever defeated the people that live in that Middle Eastern area. And so those ontological uncertainties, we ignore history. And Rumsfeld didn't read that book. That book's on my shelf, by the way. So we got to do that. So here's how we put capabilities-based planning to work. So that was all about why we're doing this and all this stuff. So we got to have a partition, we got to have guidance, we got scenarios, we got goals, we got all these pieces. So when you're doing capabilities-based planning, take this out, put it on your desk, and write something about each one of these, and then you will have the basis of your capabilities-based plan. And here's the result we're going to get. If we start with all of our people and our services and all of our assets, and we write down what processes and activities we have to respond to a natural disaster, or flying to Mars, or solving climate change, we then get processes and activities. And then through those missions and our agencies and our stakeholders, we can then define in meaningful units of measure. And the buzzword is units of measure meaningful to the decision makers. That starts with effectiveness and performance. We can write down a plan that has strategic beneficial outcomes, and that's now going to be capabilities-based planning. Then, and only then, can we start doing our regular project management stuff. cost and schedule and technical performance. So effectiveness and performance is how we need to talk to each other in units that then are based on technical performance measures and key performance parameters and all those buzzwords before we ever start making a cost and a schedule and a resource plan and all that stuff. What does done look like in units of measure meaningful to the decision makers? Over and over again, that's the mantra. So we got to have project portfolio management. We got to have a trade space for all these things, because nothing can be controlled if it's aleatory uncertainty. The weather is aleatory, earthquakes are aleatory, political situations are aleatory. You can't cause them to not occur. And this capabilities-based planning has to be in the agency's response to make decisions on. And they have to be based on some mechanism that increases in its own maturity as the situation emerges. So that's the other thing that's missing from our standard PMI way, where we make a plan, we make a budget, we make a schedule, and then we go execute it. Well, that means that whole plan and budget and schedule and people is operating in the absence of aleatory uncertainty. And therefore, it's going to be low probability of success, because we are not going to be able to respond to things that only deities can fix. So it transforms the agencies from being a functional delivery system to a strategic enabling system. So that's where now our PMPs and our project management world gets involved, is we're not delivering functions, we're implementing and executing strategies. And those strategies will be emerging because we are operating in the presence of uncertainty. So this little phrase of in or under uncertainty, capabilities-based planning is suitable for all kinds of community challenges, everything that works in the presence of uncertainties. And it's got to be flexible and adaptable and iterative and incremental and modular, all fully buzzword compliant. And that's the way that success is provided. It's also, when it's missing, is one of the sources of project failure, is we don't have a capabilities-based plan that can operate in the presence of emerging uncertainties. So here's 7 steps, right? It's got to be top down. It's got to focus on the organization. It's got to have a map. It's got to link all the initiatives. It's got to determine the highest priorities. It's got to avoid seeking solutions before the problems are solved or identified. And this is our common modern world. We've got solutions looking for a problem to solve. My favorite cynical response is, this is what Agile does. It's a solution looking for a problem to solve. What's the problem that Agile is going to be solved? Oh, I don't know, but if you adopt Agile, you can deal with the problem. That is not true. So it's the Agile industrial complex selling you certifications, and PMI got into this, of a solution looking for a problem to solve. Find out what the problem is, have a capabilities-based plan for solving that problem, and then iteratively and incrementally adjust that plan on a periodic basis. In the world that we work in, we have mandatory reporting monthly, and I was a program manager in a cleanup of the second worst toxic waste site on the planet. The first was Chernobyl, and the second was a nuclear weapons processing plant that was upwind from Denver, Colorado, rather than downwind. And it was called Rocky Flats. And we applied all of these kind of things in that to clean it up in a 2-week window, 5 years ahead of the award of the contract, or after the award, for $7 billion without fail. Was what the world, and that was all written in a book, and I'll send a reference to that book, called Making the Impossible Possible. And it's iterative and incremental, and it's evolutionary. But done was clean up the site, put all the waste products in their proper homes, from standard industrial waste all the way up to nuclear weapons waste laying in the middle of plants. No one dies, lock the gate, throw the keys over the fence. And it was one of the best programs I ever worked in my career. So we follow this capabilities-based planning stuff. So here's the thing. It's got to start with a holistic appreciation of the problem. What is the problem we're trying to solve? What's the logic around that? What are the plausible solutions? What are the requirements? And most importantly, what are the constraints for making these types of things? So you can use this as your guide, and there's a link right there for implementing this in public safety in the security center. So here's the two stages, right? What capabilities do I want? And then what is my plan, and how is that plan affordable? Because it has to be affordable. So you could take this picture, and when you're starting your capabilities-based plan, lay that out, put this up on the wall, and you're all set. So it takes an outward-looking, strategic, top-down perspective that demands that the agency respond in this way. If you're going to do it tactically after the fact, it's not going to work. The world is littered with failed projects. These mega project failures that we read about in the new books of Bent Fleeberg's new books of how big things get done. He talks about this too. Transportation projects, airport building, infrastructure, healthcare. They've all have failed outcomes because they did not know what capabilities they needed to possess to accomplish the mission. This is over and over and over again. The world is littered with these failed projects. So the second step is we now got to do bottom up. Now that we know what done looks like in units of measure meaningful to the decision makers, now we start with bottom up. What are the actual steps to do that? Okay, so here's agencies do these fields, right? We get the agency does not have a clear vision about what done looks like. It doesn't have mechanical things of testing the realistic expectations. It's got the wrong people or the inadequate people, and there's no stakeholders involved, and there's no focus. So what capabilities-based planning, by the way, those things on the left are in PMBOK. That's how they talk about it. Capabilities-based planning speaks about other things. Back again to the mantra, what capabilities do I need to possess to accomplish the mission? What is the mission? What is the units of measure of this mission? How would I recognize the mission as solution if it walked in the door? And then I've got to have resources. Then I got to have all of these key strategic outcomes and key results. That is called strategy. That's balanced scorecard. That's several other strategy making things, but these OKRs, and there's some references there. So here's where we go. Here's how we get it going. If we're going to be capabilities-based planning project leaders. What are the scenarios that may happen, have happened, could possibly happen in the future? And we know that there are earthquake seismic faults in Turkey. It hadn't happened in many, many years, in hundreds of years, but it's going to happen no matter what. What's our plan when it does happen? They didn't have a plan. They did not have a scenario-based response. Only then can I come up with what's all the work I have to have. Then the capabilities-based planning can say, in this case, for example, let's provide all the citizens with proper medical attention when it occurs. They were poorly prepared to respond to the buildings falling down and having hundreds, if not thousands, of people be injured. They were looking at things after the fact. So here's, if you want to take anything away, and I'll make a little pitch to a book at the bottom there, of these 5 immutable principles of project success. What does done look like in units of measure meaningful to the decision maker? What's our plan to get to done? What people do we need? Time, money, resources, whatever it is. What are the impediments that are going to prevent me from being successful? And how do I measure physical percent complete on our path to done? The passage of time and the consumption of money and the production of products or services is not a measure of progress to plan. The only measure of progress to plan is I am meeting the goals of my effectiveness and performance as planned. And those are systems engineering measures. So project management lives inside of systems engineering. So that's the pitch. And those items, those 5 immutable principles came about from the school of hard knocks of being late and over budget and it not working at the end of the day. We had a little life-changing experience maybe 8 or 9 years ago. The GPS, the global positioning system, ground systems, and the flight systems are all here in Denver. Raytheon builds the ground systems, Lockheed builds the flight systems, and an undersecretary of the Air Force. By the way, the GPS that you use on your phone is owned and operated by the United States Air Force. And the Secretary of Air Force came, an undersecretary, a woman, I can't remember her name now. She asked this question to the Raytheon people: "You guys know what you're doing? Because it doesn't look like it. They're $5 billion over budget and they're a year and a half late. So what capabilities do we need to possess to get back on schedule?" So we were on the team to put them back on schedule. We're here to put you back on schedule. If you're a Star Wars fan, if you remember in the first Star Wars movie, Darth Vader arrives on the Death Star. You can hear his spacecraft fly through space, which violates the laws of physics, but that's okay. And the commander is, oh, Lord Vader. He goes, "Dispense with the pleasantries, Commander. I'm here to put you back on schedule." So I work for firms that go around and do that. So we don't play that little video very often, but sometimes we do. So here's what done looks like, and here's our little checklist. So we want to keep on time here and get back on schedule ourselves. We got 10 minutes later. What are the units of measure of success? So you can use this. What capabilities? Again, who are the stakeholders? What's the effectiveness and performance? The second one is, what's the plan? And a plan is not a schedule. A plan describes the increasing maturity of the outcomes of done. You can't get done by just waving a wand. You have to go through these steps of increasing maturity. So the question that's always answered is, how long are we willing to wait before we find out we're late? And at our Rocky Flats, shutting down the nuclear weapons plant, the answer to that was, early on, was once a month, and then it became once a week, and then it became in the last year, it was once a day. So I had about 20 project managers working for me, and we had a thing called the plan of the day. And we ask at 10 o'clock, where are we? At 2 o'clock, we ask, where are we? At 4 o'clock, we ask, where are we? And if we weren't going to make the plan of the day, my next question was, what kind of pizza do you guys like? Because no one is leaving the site until we finish our plan of the day. And sometimes we were there till 8 or 9 o'clock at night, but the project was lost in the last year, one day at a time, because we had promised the Congress of the United States that we're going to close this site in this 2-week window in November of 2004. And our CEO was not going to go back to Congress and explain we didn't do our job in exchange for the $9 billion you gave us. What resources we need? That's pretty straightforward. That's standard PMI stuff, resource planning. What's wrong with our risk management? What impediments are going to be along the way? All risk comes from uncertainty. The project management approach to risk management is forbidden at NASA. They don't allow that to work. They have their own thing. And I'll give you a link to a thing called risk-informed decision-making. It's all based on uncertainty and not the 5x5 charts, not the probability of occurrence multiplied times the probability of impact. That has blown up double-digit $1 billion worth of hardware and killed many dozens of people at NASA. So they banned the use of that. And then we can only measure progress to plan with physical percent complete, which if you've raised teenagers or young people, it's tangible evidence. Our son, who's now a researcher at a university, would ask him, "I'll give you $20, Alex, if you mow the lawn and clean it up." "Okay, I'm done, Dad. Can you show me?" Is the lawnmower put away? Is everything cleaned up? Are there no, dead animals out that you ran over with the lawnmower? Not our dogs, but, prairie dogs or whatever. Show me physical evidence that you made physical progress to plan. And those are at the bottom. Key performance indicators, technical performance indicators, and critical to customer parameters. Show me the tangible evidence that you did what you said you were going to do. So here's some more buzzwords here. Got to have a plan. We got to keep going. So to reach done, we got to describe what done looks like in more buzzwords repeated: tangible, evidentiary material, meaningful to the decision makers. So if we're going to navigate across the ocean, and we're in Columbus's ship, and he did not know, by the way, that North America was here. He thought he was going to India and to China, and he crashed into the coast, actually in the Caribbean. But done looked like we're going to arrive in China or India, because they had gone that way with Marco Polo. They knew that continent existed. They did not know that North America existed. So they were surprised when in their path to India and China, there was another whole civilization there. So here's my little real picture. Planning and capabilities-based planning is a full contact sport. Now, today we have technology that does this, but you've got to have a picture, a big visible chart. And that the woman that's pointing to something there, she was my colleague. We were building this plan. This is the plan to build the spacecraft called now called Orion. It was called Crew Exploration, to fly to the space station, dock, stay for 9 months, come home, and live to tell about it. This is not a schedule. This is a plan of increasing maturity of the outcomes of the program in units of measure meaningful to the decision makers. And it's a knockdown, drag out argument every single day until the thing flies away and is successful. So that's the way we do it. We do it with a better tool today that's electronic, but you're doing sticky notes. And by the way, you have to go buy the sticky notes that stick on the wall overnight, because if you just buy the regular 3M sticky notes, in about 2 days they'll fall off, and now you got a bigger problem. So here we are. This increasing the probability of success requires this integrated program performance management system. And that's how I got the phrase for my blog. And it was from a Super Bowl ad from Price Waterhouse. It's called Herding Cats. And you cannot herd cats. They will not. I'm not a cat person, I'm a dog person. But if you call them, they will not come. And if you try to pick them up, they'll bite you. So these kind of programs are like herding cats. So why is this strategy critical here, right? We've never done it before. It's important. All the failures we estimate from real problems isn't bad strategy, it's bad execution. 10% of the strategies are effective. If you know what you understand about the strategy, you got to understand what comes first. And if you're not managing the strategy, you're not managing the program. So that's the key. So here's how you do strategic-based closed loop control with performance-based program management inside of capabilities-based planning. What's the vision? What's the mission? What are the critical success factors? What capabilities do we need to produce? And what is the strategy to deliver those capabilities at the needed cost, at the needed time, with the needed capabilities? And then that's the closed loop control. And then you have to answer the question in this loop: how long am I willing to wait before I find out I'm over budget, I'm behind schedule, and it's not going to work? And then you need to sample that at half that rate. It's called the Nyquist frequency, and take corrective actions to stay on schedule. You can only go to Mars in a 3-week window every 3 years. And the contracts are written for the vendors here in town, both the flight vehicle and the launch vehicle, that they don't get paid if they don't fly on that day in that 3-week window. You own the spacecraft in your own facilities at your own cost for the next 3 years. And then NASA might call you back and fly again. So the culture is you can't be late. I can always get more money, but it's got to work. So here's the core question that's got to be answered with our capabilities-based planning, right? What data and processes do we need? Why, when, what, where, and how are the tangible benefits? And how long am I willing to wait before I find out that I'm not fulfilling that? And that's this closed loop control. And the way you do that is you start with this notion of a document that's not in the PMI world. I'm going to rag on them a little bit more, called the concept of operations. If this showed up tomorrow and it was free and it worked, what would I do with it? What mission would I accomplish? How would I fulfill my strategy? Write that down. And there's some guides right there. IEEE's got a bunch of them. And it starts with effectiveness and performance. And we in the US and in the UK and in France and in Germany have bought all kinds of things in the defense business that did not answer these questions. And we spent trillions of dollars on stuff that we don't need. So here's a way to get out of that. Then we got to do assessing, right? We're back to the same repeating over and over message. What's our mission? What are the capabilities to accomplish that mission? What are the attributes of those capabilities? What are the gaps? What are the risks? How do you identify them? How do you conduct an assessment of their viability? And how do you take these corrections? So you got to have this capabilities-based assessment. Here's a little checklist for doing that. So best practices for capabilities-based assessment are these bullets. I don't need to read them to you, but when you get the hard copy of this deck, you can use those to adjust your or to assess whether you're making progress here. And then this is the picture that needs to be on the wall in your office or in your customer's office or your client's office about how to do capabilities-based planning based on a concept of operations. And you got to have physical representation of every one of these. And I think I'm picking my hard copy here, and I think we're at the very end of this because we're almost at the bottom of the hour. And this idea that we've got putting this to work for our capabilities-based planning is that hopefully the people in the future will have capabilities-based planning that fulfill a strategy. You got to feed everybody. You can feed the world too. You got to repair. What's my plan to repair the earthquake and the destroyed infrastructure? How do I get all the services back online to normal where they were before the earthquake? How do I assess the effectiveness of fulfilling these missions? And how do I assess the progress to plan? What's my physical percent complete to that? And how do I make choices about the technical and the operational requirements? And how do I put all this together inside of a portfolio that I turn to page 1 on at the end of the earthquake? And when everything settles down, and having lived through a few earthquakes in California, they finally figured out how to do all this. And this is it for any operational challenge, no matter what, whether it's building a piece of software that sells, products to people on Amazon, or solving the earthquakes, is what's my mission? What's my objective? What are the metrics of the strategic success? What's the capabilities I need to possess? What are the uncertainties? How do I analyze all this stuff? And how do I assess my options? So this picture here on page 55 needs to be in your notebook and a few pictures back. But the reason that we have less than successful fulfillment in the presence of disasters is they're always doing the planning after the event. What are the plans after the earthquake occurred? What are the plans after this tsunami hits the coast of Japan? What are the disasters after the tornadoes that strike in our southeast? Not what capabilities do I need to possess to respond to that event, because it will happen. And we're always after the fact, scrambling around, trying to figure out what to do, rather than turning to page 1 of our capabilities-based plan. So we're 3 minutes after my scheduled completion, but
no problem. Thank you, Glenn. Actually, we have questions, but some of them you have already answered. That then I will quickly ask 2 of them. And one question is, can the plan be a single backlog item?
It could certainly at a very high level. The single backlog item, if we're doing Agile in the presence of an earthquake, is find everybody that needs to be rescued and rescue them.
Yeah.
Get them out of the building before it falls down further. So certainly that's it. Now, to do that, you may need some more backlog items, but the first thing is go save lives. We can always build back the infrastructure, but we don't want more people to die as a result of us not going and finding them.
Thank you. Another question regarding to CSF, and you got those from requirements analysis. The question is that.
Yes. So these critical success factors come from the stakeholders. Yeah. So they should know in some way what they are, and the two units to start with are effectiveness and performance.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And thank you, joining us, and thank you for this great presentation.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. And I want to thank Olivier again for signing me up for this.
Thank you very much. And yeah, have a good day.
Okay, good. And I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll watch the next one.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.